There's so many like fun, cool brands out there doing very interesting things. And I feel like, Brad, if you've taught me anything, it's just like, test it. If it works, great. Just go in that direction. Making things like pretty binary. Whereas I think with like in the realm of competition, I think a lot of people kind of like, they're like, oh, we're competing against like X brand. And like they introduced whatever, like a countdown timer on their website. Maybe we should do the same, and I think going too deep in that direction is a little dangerous, right? Because then you're, before you know it, you have all these tabs open of all these competitors and they all look exactly the same because they're all looking at each other.
All right, Dylan, been waiting for this one. Excited to finally be talking with you since it's been 24 hours since we last spoke. So excited it's only been one day until we can talk again. But before we jump into it, why don't you introduce yourself and give everyone who's listening a little bit of background on Dylan and your brothers.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here, Brad. Funny in a podcast setting because I feel like we have so many candid conversations. But I'm Dylan Kim. I am the head of marketing for Brevitē, a direct-to-consumer backpack brand. We're based in Brooklyn. Did it about 6 years ago with my two brothers. And yeah, it's been great. So we've been involved. Brad, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe we've been working together for what, 2.5 years? I think maybe longer.
I don't know if the history books go back that far. I don't know if they're tracking history, but yeah, it's been, we might be approaching 3 years here in a couple of months.
That's wild. Yeah. So, I mean, clearly been very, very happy. And yeah, so we primarily 6 years ago got started on Kickstarter. And then it just kind of kept momentum. Never really set out to start a direct-to-consumer brand, but that was just kind of the natural progression from there. We primarily sell kind of camera bags, and then more recently have just launched everyday bags a year ago.
Yeah, nice. So going back 3 years, before we started working together, what were some of the challenges or pain points that you were facing? So 2 to 3 years in the business, and like a year or two coming off the Kickstarter, what were some of the pain points that led you to somehow find us or Googling us and stumbling across Elevar?
Yeah, so we were having massive issues with our Google Analytics. It was just, to say it was messy would be an understatement. I mean, we were not accurately tracking really anything, I guess to not get really nitty gritty, like paid prospecting, Facebook traffic was coming in as direct. And it was really just, we couldn't glean any meaningful insights because it was just horrendously disorganized and just messy in general. So I actually stumbled across a blog post that was I believe an introduction to ETM and Google Tag Manager, like how to use it. Like had no experience at all with Google Tag Manager. Barely had any experience with Google Analytics at the time. And so I think we followed the guide and were so impressed with how thorough it was, where we were like, we have to reach out to the people who wrote this. And then I believe that it was like a mutual colleague of ours, Kyle. And I was like, wow, Kyle's here. So I'm going to actually reach out. And then we were kind of off to the races from there. And I mean, it's funny to think in the past 3 years, just like how much we've accomplished.
Yeah, I think where have you been in that 3 years? Have you 3, 4, 5x, 10x? I mean, you guys have grown so fast. Sometimes it's hard to even keep up.
Oh, I don't even know. I mean, probably. I mean, if we're counting this year as well, I mean, like 10, 15, somewhere in that realm. I mean, it's really been incredible, and it's been very fast. I would say a lot of the kind of foundational work that we've been doing over the past couple of years really kind of culminated within the past year, and kind of, the onset of the pandemic and kind of the rise of online shopping. But a lot of it was, very, I wouldn't say it was like an overnight success by any means, but it was a lot of like laying down that foundational work so we could kind of see that growth.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been an awesome ride to see you guys through the ups and downs over the years. And so let's jump into some more juicy nuggets that other founders or brands that are listening can use to help them grow their business and fight through their challenges. So you gave a little bit of background on the business. So you started with camera backpacks. Now you offer the everyday backpacks. Anything else about the business? So funded, not funded, bootstrapped, where are you based? Some basic foundational overview on the business, I think would be great for everybody.
Yeah, I could tell the whole story. No. So we're completely bootstrapped. So we, like I said, we launched on Kickstarter, and from the beginning we were very organic. So for about 2 years, we didn't do any Facebook marketing, anything like that. We had a couple blog posts that went viral on Reddit. We had a couple like Instagram giveaways that really helped us gain early traction. And then we started to kind of introduce the paid strategy. And so once we introduced the paid strategy and we're like, wow, we're, out putting money every day. Like that was when we were like, okay, we really need to get kind of all of our data in a line. I think when we even started working with you, our like email modal wasn't correctly even collecting emails, it was just kind of like, and to my understanding, I was like, this is normal, right? But yeah, so just, we've always kind of had that kind of like organic first strategy. And so even more recently, we've been seeing a lot of success on TikTok. And it's been really nice to kind of feel that, like, kind of almost getting back to your roots in a sense, where you're like always creating content, always kind of being more of a content first brand, as opposed to kind of relying on either outsourced agencies or things like that to provide that content. But yeah, we've been, I would say, our maybe like 5th or 6th product launch was when we really started to like finally see success. So a lot of it, again, has kind of been that like building up over time, really listening to our customers, kind of seeing what they really desire in a product, and then just kind of going from there. I think kind of even deeper from that, something that's been really interesting within the past year, just like given kind of the pandemic and even like further listening to our customers, one thing that you wouldn't necessarily get from, I don't know, like the broad data or like the website traffic, things like that, was really this desire for our base to, know where their money was going, knowing like what causes to support, things like that. And so we actually launched like a choose what you pay or donate about a year ago. And that ended up being one of our most successful marketing campaigns, where you could essentially either pay full price and we would do like a 20% donation of that, or you could just accept the discount. And so I can't remember the final number. I believe it was around $35,000 that we were able to raise over the year. And then we kind of furthered that, and our base was kind of, wondering what was next. And so we actually, we've done a couple big donations since. So we did $150,000 worth of bags to New York City's homeless. And then actually earlier this year, we just announced it. We are donating 10,000 upcycled bags. So we're actually taking,
that's awesome.
It's actually really interesting too. So we're working with our manufacturer, taking fabric that they would otherwise throw out, and we're going to make those into backpacks. And then we're partnered up with this organization called Kids in Need to distribute those backpacks to young students in need. So
nice.
So just like being able to kind of, one, kind of see this business grow, and then 2, have it actually be like a force for good and in a very meaningful way has been amazing. Yeah.
Well, kudos to you guys. I know that was a big push last year, and we had a couple other customers and brands that were doing similar things. I think it's just great to see that, leaving the world in a better place than when you may have entered it. So 6 years in, and we've all made a lot of mistakes and learned the hard lessons. So when you look back at the last 6 years, 6± where was like one of your first milestones that you hit? Where did you guys, the three of you, did you say like the first million in sales, we're going to celebrate and go out? Or what were those type of milestones that you're looking for? Was the number of bags that you're selling? What was it back even in the Kickstarter days? What were you?
Yeah. I think it's interesting reflecting on it because it's definitely tied to revenue. Like I think like the first million we made. But I'm sure as you know, right? Like you hit that and you're like, it's a very fleeting feeling, right? Where it feels great. And then you're like, okay, great. I always say it's like the realm of e-commerce is like the best and worst drug, right? Where like even we'll have like record sales days and you're like, okay, that's great. But and so I'm even trying to like, find better ways to almost like check myself and like check what I'm doing, because it is always like, okay, that was great, but like what's next? And so we've always kind of been really kind of future focused, but I mean, definitely take the time to, I think when we really started to feel it was as we were like, especially last year when we started to really pick up traction kind of month over month. I would say from like the end of 2019, kind of like, probably like halfway through 2020, we're like, wow, like the growth has just been like double digits over the past like 8 months, and that was a great feeling.
Yeah. So when you think about that milestone, what would you change? What would you do differently? Knowing what you know now and having that 2020 vision to look back, is there anything that you would do differently? Any of your big learning lessons that caused a lot of pain that you just had to experience it? But if you were able to start over, what would you do differently?
Oh, there's so many. It's such a big answer. So I think like personally myself, I think like being like where you are while you're there, we've always tried to come across maybe as like slightly larger of a brand or things like that. And I think like one thing, for example, that like TikTok has taught me, has been like kind of the transparency is like very valued. And so just trying to have like little touch points kind of with the customer has been huge. Like we do, we say thank you to everyone that places an order, and it's just a direct text email. And a lot of those, especially the repeat ones, go right to my inbox. And it's been a really, really nice way to engage with customers, because it seems very simple, very straightforward, but it's kind of a little bit of like a hard touch point sometimes, or a very easy one to forget, I would say. And then I would say kind of as the brand big lessons is just like having solid foundations in place for everything, whether that's fulfillment, manufacturing, marketing. I think it's very like fun and easy to like, think about starting all these processes, all these different projects, but then they kind of, burn bright and die young just because there's not a solid process in place to make sure that you're carrying that on. Yeah.
What's one thing that you think you've done right that you wouldn't change? So is that the customer support, the personal outreach? Is there anything that you've done that you feel like has really helped you during the tough times, but also helped you accelerate faster during the good times?
Yeah. So I personally don't look at my like competitors' websites too much, or I don't look at really competing products too much. It's more of just like a personal thing. I find that I don't know, there's like, this is such a random story, but I remember I was like, took a surfing lesson or something, and they were like, don't look at the rocks because you'll head towards the rocks as you're riding the wave. Like look anywhere else but there, because you're naturally kind of go in that direction. And I feel like, though a silly story, I feel like I've always kind of kept that notion in the back of my head with kind of like the space we're in. Like we always wanted to be different, kind of bright, fun, youthful bags. And so just not looking at really any of our competitors and kind of just like sticking to our guns, doing our own thing, has always been the objective. And it's something I kind of like hold as like an internal mantra where I'm like, just don't look at really what they do. Just, do what feels right.
Even so creative as well, whether it's video ads, organic, paid, any media, like even, so is it not looking at what they're doing product wise, not look at what they're doing on their website or media, or is it just everything? You're just not looking at the rock, and the rock is everything.
Everything. I would say like we, you know, I think like garnering inspiration. I have like, you know, there's so many like fun, cool brands out there doing very interesting things. And I feel like, Brad, if you've taught me anything, it's just like, you know, test it. If it works, great. Just go in that direction. Making things like pretty binary. Whereas I think with like in the realm of competition, I think a lot of people kind of like, they're like, oh, we're competing against like X brand. And like they introduced whatever, like a countdown timer on their website. Maybe we should do the same, you know? And I think going too deep in that direction is a little dangerous, right? Because then you're, you know, before you know it, you have all these tabs open of all these competitors and they all look exactly the same because they're all looking at each other.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. And probably not the norm. I bet more are looking at others thinking they need to potentially keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. So that's you're yanging whenever everyone else is yinging, so to speak. But
love that.
Bootstrapped means you don't have endless resources. So when it comes to when you are in the good times where you have the flash sale or you're coming off Q4, potentially have, you know, more to use, where are you allocating resources? Are you hiring more? Are you looking to bring things that you've historically have contracted out in-house, or is it applying that to just top of the funnel and trying to acquire faster? What's that process look like for you guys today?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of both. I would say a lot, you know, because being the nature of being bootstrapped, every dollar just matters so effectively. And so even as we've, you know, built out our business, built out our teams, you know, hired, fired, whatever, different agencies and different contractors, it's always about, you know, like how can they either like introduce value to something that we can't do internally or can't maintain internally. And then even with the hiring, it's like a lot of it is, you know, working more on like the day-to-day so that I can afford more time to kind of look out farther, prepare for launches, do more initiatives that kind of expand upon what we're already doing. I think it's been interesting with like the most recent iOS 14 updates, because I think a lot
Never heard of it. I'm first time hearing of it.
I didn't even want to bring it up because I'm like, oh gosh, you know, you probably hear it in your sleep practically at this point. But I think a lot of that has kind of shown the world in a sense where, you know, a lot of direct consumer brands, including ourselves, rely pretty heavily on Facebook. And there cannot be, you know, it's not like the end all be all. And so kind of with what we've done, we've always kind of been content first and really making sure that we have that kind of nailed down. Like even, you know, I just showed you like our backdrop that's like right next to me. Really just making sure like our ease to create any content we need, whether that's for our website, ad creative, you know, the TikToks that we've been doing recently, that the barrier to do that is as small as possible. So kind of answers your question in a sense, but really just the way I perceive things, where I'm like, because we are a bit more bootstrapped, we're not doing these like $10,000-$20,000 shoots or things like that. For a number of years, it was just myself doing all the product photography, and more than happy to relinquish that control. But a lot of it is just, you know, how can we do the most with like the littlest amount of capital possible?
So it's like you have your founder scorecard. I don't know if you've heard this before, but you have your founder scorecard and you take everything that you might be doing in the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, and you bucket them out to $10, $100, $1,000, $10,000 tasks. And you are trying, in essence, buy back your time throughout the week. So look at potentially a $10 tasks or $100 tasks that it's not your genius zone. You've just been doing it, but there are plenty others that are capable and probably more skilled at doing it. So that sounds like you've been taking that approach of trying to unlock time in your calendar so you can spend more time in those $10,000 tasks, which for you is still in the creative and coming up with those bigger campaigns that are likely to move the needle. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. I think it's even been interesting with this kind of in the past year with the big unlock of Zoom and Google Meets, where all of a sudden people are like, can I sneak like 15 minutes onto your calendar, or can I sneak a half hour here? And so even for myself, like having to just set calendar blocks where it's just like no call zones, kind of like a do not fly zone in a sense, just to kind of unlock that and just get the deeper kind of, like that deeper kind of thinking going on of just how can we make more like foundational change to the business, or how are we measuring success with these different marketing channels, different initiatives that we're doing, and really just kind of going from there.
Yeah. So I think one thing that I've seen from you guys over the last couple of years is you were, in the visibility I have with our customers, I feel like you were ahead of others when it comes to YouTube. So really leveraging video, leveraging YouTube, obviously now TikTok with video. What were some of the data points that you were looking at that maybe just triggered, like, we need to focus more on YouTube, or now we need to focus more on Instagram? Are there specific data points that you were following your gut or the data, or was it more videos are thing, here are the platforms that support video, so we're going to go in that direction?
Yeah. So I think it was a little bit of both. I think a lot of it's like where is the current attention going? Or I would say like even for us where, everyone's on their phone. So we lean pretty heavily into SMS. I believe you were the one that introduced me like 2 years ago. And so
didn't invent SMS. I'm sure postscripts and intentives and all the others out there will have other things to say about that.
Yeah. Of course. But I think a lot of it is just like understanding kind of like where like the most affordable attention is on the internet at that time. And so, at one point it was on Instagram, and then I would say then it kind of transitioned over to YouTube, and then now it's on TikTok. So really just kind of seeing where like we can get like eyeballs onto us for like the cheapest amount possible.
Bootstrap mentality.
Yeah. Love
it. That's the way. I mean, you think about it. If you probably had millions in the bank, you would probably just go double down on Facebook and Google, where it's easier to produce creative in theory to get it out there, versus the video and the production and making sure production quality, measuring that and keeping that fresh.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like from some of our conversations, I'm like very cynical in a sense of, like not the integrity of the data, I should say, but more so I think some of these platforms make it very easy for you to spend a lot of money. And, I think the funny part about kind of balancing our data is like, it's so much about kind of like having the cleanest, like Google Analytics, source media, whatnot possible. So then you can make like more like, like qualitative assumptions off of that, whether it's like your post-purchase survey or just like an open, like an open response survey that we have our customers do, things like that. And so it's funny kind of like balancing both of them, because I'm under the belief, love Facebook. It's a great channel for us, but I think they've made it very easy for customers to kind of spend a lot there. Whereas I question out like what realm is it actually effective, right? Like at what spend, like are we spending 20% more than we should be, things like that, because they make the reporting so easy. So I think that's what's been fascinating about iOS 14 is kind of seeing that like, shake the boat a little bit.
Yeah. How many videos have you produced, whether they're cut up videos in total, but how many videos have you tested on YouTube?
On YouTube, I would say it's significantly less than Facebook for sure. Because it's just longer format, things like that. I think like the ads that we found that work are typically like, the 1 to 2 minutes. They're kind of going like really in depth with like who you are and like what's your story, what's the product, things like that. I mean, 100.
Okay.
So many.
Yeah, it's a good. So 100, you're in the hundreds at least. What are you looking at when you're evaluating, okay, these type of videos are performing better than these, and let's focus more on that? like what are the metrics? What are the specific KPIs, whether it's specific to YouTube or analytics or anywhere in between you guys look at?
Totally. So I think one mistake that a lot of brands make is that they're not developing content for those platforms. So for example, like a YouTube ad versus a YouTube video versus a Facebook ad versus a TikTok, they're like 4 completely different types of content. Video, the tool is the same, right? Like it's a camera or your phone, things like that. But I think what a lot of brands don't necessarily, they kind of think about it as just like as one that they're going to repurpose for all. And that kind of works, but I think to gain like true efficiency on that, like you kind of have to, even it's very strange, but even like when you watch like, I don't know, like a YouTube video, like how to tie a tie. Yeah. Like that video on YouTube is very different than like what you'd see on like Instagram, or what you would see on TikTok. So I think a lot of, you can kind of repurpose and it will work somewhat, but I think the true unlock is really just like, if you're going to make a video for a platform, then do that. Yeah.
So you guys will shoot specific videos per platform, even YouTube, whether it's your just a basic YouTube channel video versus a top of the funnel video.
Yeah. So we haven't done like a YouTube channel video in a while, but for like an ad, we absolutely would. It'd be a little more high quality, probably not filmed on an iPhone. Whereas like with a Facebook creative or a TikTok, most likely filmed on an iPhone. Even the aspect ratios are different. But just having kind of like, I think like that base and then kind of moving from there has been great for us.
Yeah, nice. So we've talked a lot about in the past. So the 6 years and where you've been in the last 3 years, 5, 10x in the business. What's the future look like for you and the brand? So with Brevitē and just your outlook in e-commerce, what are your open-ended thoughts on e-com and what others might be having to consider?
Yeah. So I think, and I'm sure we feel quite similar on this. I think, one, with the brand, we're, going to continue making bags. We just launched our Better Bags campaign, and I think it kind of summarizes who we are very nicely. So the idea of, making better materials, better function, better impact. So just really trying to really be like an industry leader in kind of all 3 of those. Still doing good. And so, growing the team here, I think like slowly and intentionally, that bootstrap mentality. Yeah. And then I think with the future of e-commerce, it's interesting to see the different iterations. And I think it's been funny because we've been around for 6 years. So kind of seeing, like I would say like there was a time in place where like a spin wheel on your website didn't look like, it looked normal and not incredibly tacky, And then even now where I think you see a lot of like very beautiful sites, but I often question kind of like how well that they actually convert or things like that. Whereas for us, that's always been kind of like, bootstrapped business, right? Like it's always been like, okay, like how can we convert as many people as possible? We've made phenomenal strides. It's hard to believe kind of where we started versus where we are with Elevar. Really, it's been incredible. But I think e-commerce will become a bit more like personalized. And I think that kind of like meaningful touch, I would say like maybe like 3 years ago, like what you had like Instagram brands, where it was like very clean, very highly produced, very curtailed. I think, what was it? Bloomberg had a great article about Blands, which I thought was fantastic, where, you have all these brands that all have the exact same aesthetic, and they're very, right? Like seamless backdrops, things like that. And I think now you're going to start to see a little more texture be introduced, a little more transparency. You're seeing like Etsy stores on TikTok that are just like, 10 million view videos. You're like, that has to affect you somehow, I would love a 10 million, impression video. Right. And so I think you're going to start to see somewhat of like I don't want to say like the layers peel back, but you'll start to see more of that personalization being injected into the brands. So not necessarily like founder centric. It will more just be like, oh, we're like a small young team here, like support us.
Yeah. Interesting. So the personalization to me, I think with COVID, retail just getting crushed and e-com obviously going the opposite direction. How do you feel? Do you think consumers are going to miss out on that? I want to go into the store. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. I want to make sure that it meets my need of what I'm looking for. Do you think it's feasible in that personalization to try to recreate that experience virtually? Or do you think it could be more difficult to do that and you have to kind of make up for that with the free returns and lifetime guarantees, which I know you guys have, and that sort of value add. So you de-risk that from the customers since they don't have that opportunity potentially, or don't want to take the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's a little kind of a both, I would say. Like you'll never kind of have one without the other. I still think like brick and mortar retail, like there's some people who are like, e-com was, the death of the brick and mortar store. And I think just fundamentally, that's just not true. People still shop. Even like it kind of was like a trend kind of pre-COVID for these like trendy e-commerce brands to launch flagship
pop-up store. Yeah, they're pop-up stores. Yeah.
And so I think even for us, like, we sell backpacks and everyone wants to know like how it looks on their back. And you're able to achieve that through video and, and through like free returns, things like that. But like at the end of the day, people still love to like browse and look around. And so I don't think that I think e-commerce will kind of just forever live with brick and mortar, but and maybe there's like some sort of like more integrated shopping experiences. I know there's like a lot of really cool companies that are trying to like meld the two together. And I think you'll start to see a lot more of that, not necessarily like this idea of like, e-commerce takes over all.
Great. Well, last question. This is one of my favorite questions and one of my favorite questions to get asked as well. So you touched on it a little bit in the beginning where when you and your brothers, you set off to start the quote unquote business, but you weren't really anticipating it growing into the business and where you are today and how fast that you guys have grown. So for you personally, like who have you had to become yourself to achieve the results and the success that you've had? So if you, again, looking back 6 years to where you are today, what sort of changes or mentality or whatever it might be, what have you had to change to ensure that you're fulfilling your dream and meeting those goals that you want to achieve?
It's a great question. Love ending on that. I think a big thing has just always been like the vision and like where we're going. And now it's become more so even about that, right? Where it's like, okay, we're not even, we're not focused on our competitors because we're going somewhere completely different, somewhere completely new. And I think within myself, it's been a lot of my decision making is quite binary. It's like yes or no. Like I think it's, it's like, did we reach statistical significance? Yes or no, but this one is likely the winner. Like that is very much how I approach a lot of the marketing decisions that we make, where it's like, well, did we see a lift? Yes or no? What was kind of the reaction? And it's not super dry in a sense where it's like, even with like a lot of the impact work where it's like, we almost feel like a responsibility to kind of, to be doing this work. And I think that was, it's a wonderful feeling to, know that your business is now like kind of a source for good, and like a system for good, and, having that flywheel forever there is great. But yeah, I think like, just having to become more organized, more like obsessed with like building structures. I've always been like a good tinkerer. I think what's been interesting is, running this business with my two brothers, and we're very close in age. Elliot's my twin brother, and my older brother is just a year older than me, is like always having that trust from the beginning. So I think a lot of co-founders kind of like, they forge more trust over time, whereas we kind of just started off with that. So it's been a very interesting learning experience for sure.
I made homemade salsa today as part of our team. Like we did a team thing
Yep.
I swear, a habanero is just sitting in the back of my throat right now. Oh man, right at the end of the video, which is great. But yeah, I didn't realize you guys were twins.
3 years in, now you're figuring it out. I love it.
Either you told me and I forgot about it, which that's possible. But yeah, you guys are doing amazing work. The habanero is also doing amazing work right now. If you haven't, I don't know if you guys do like these things in the office, but every 2 weeks we rotate. So we'll have 2 people, we team 2 people up, and we'll do some sort of presentation. So we've had people train on like growing plants at home, like through hydroponics, and someone else taught music. Today was salsa because Cinco de Mayo. So Abby and I she made salsa and I made salsa, but man, those habaneros they're hot.
So you like, habaneros. That's like a hot pepper. So you like hot salsa?
We went habanero and jalapenos. It went like, full hot salsa.
I love that. Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience making salsa, so maybe I can get on one of those lessons sometime.
I'll even give you the recipe. Well, this ending fits because you're talking about organic and everything's natural and TikTok, and this is a great organic ending to this video. Dylan, has been great having you on. A lot of great insights I know that others listening are going to garner and glean, that you don't need to get that $10 million, $100 million venture check to grow and scale your business. You guys are proving that model isn't for everyone, and I'm really excited and grateful to be working with you guys. So thanks for jumping on, Dylan.
Thank you.